But because of algorithms, we're now reimagining the social contract. We're realizing we need a Bill of Rights to deal with these algorithms. So these are critical issues. They're about civil rights and civil liberties and human rights. So when we think about justice, we know justice is about fairness. Yeah. Justice is about equity. And justice is about due process.
I'm Cole Williams, and I am the host of What I Know Now. And when this mic is turned off, I am listening to young people who are impacted by our system, but also helping them envision a future they haven't had a chance to see. Today, we're stepping into a conversation about how technology is starting to shape the system and what it really means for people moving through it in real time. I'm joined by Renee Cummings, a criminologist and data activist whose work sets in the intersection of artificial intelligence and justice reform. This isn't a conversation with easy answers, but it's one that asks us to think differently about systems we're building and the futures that make it possible, especially for young people whose lives are impacted or shaped by those very systems. So Renee Cummings, professor of practice at the University of Virginia, right? So I'm really glad to have you in this space with us, right? I feel like we go way back because when I originally met you, it was a couple of years ago. And you came to Grand Rapids, and I feel like you blew the whole community by storm, talking about something many of us had not really heard a lot about when you talk about AI and algorithms. And I think you've even in connecting that even with like social justice work, right? So tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are you? Why this work? And why is this so important to you?
Definitely. Well, by training, I'm a criminologist and criminal psychologist and a terrorism expert.
Okay.
Before joining the criminal justice system, I had an extensive career in journalism and broadcasting and fashion and music.
That's
so
right.
I've done a bit of everything. But it's my work as a criminologist that brought me into the space of artificial intelligence, in the space of data. As a criminologist, I spent the last maybe 20 years working with police departments globally, training police officers in everything from law enforcement leadership to how to investigate homicide and how to investigate any kind of crime. So the work that I do, I always say, is lawmaking, law breaking, and law enforcing. I do those three things. And in everything that I did, data was at the center of that work. When it comes to policing, predictive analytics in policing, what we call predictive policing, was something that became very, very popular in the late 90s with the advent of CompStat coming out of New York City, looking at the data, putting those cops on dots, finding ways to use data to reduce crime and, of course, to predict crime. So spending a lot of time in that space, looking at the different ways predictive policing turned into intelligence-led policing, and now we're calling it precision policing, but also realizing the data continued to fail us. We were putting the same cops in the same spaces, we were over-policing the same communities, and we were not providing the kinds of interventions that were required. And it was definitely a feeling of disappointment for me, because when I entered this space as a young criminologist, leaving John Jay's College of Criminal Justice in New York, I had all these big ideas for juvenile justice, for criminal justice, for forensics, for criminal psychology, and realizing that the data was over-promising and under-delivering, but it did put me in the space of artificial intelligence where I am now. So it did something good.
That was really important for, I think, you to point out, right? Because I think when we serve young people, we always ask them, who do you want to be? What do you want to become? Right? And I think you just helped us understand that each pathway is a pathway towards something. So eventually you get to it, but you may not always have the answer when you originally start.
Most definitely. It really was a very, I don't know, maybe it was prophecy, as they say, because I was working as a therapist in a therapeutic community on Randall's Island in New York. And that is a 24-hour facility for individuals dealing with various levels of drug addiction.
Okay.
And while I was doing that in the evenings, I was working during the day at the Fashion Institute of Technology. So I would work in fashion and academia during the day. And then as soon as that day was finished, I would head 2 trains, 1 bus to Randall's Island, and I'd be in a whole different community. But it was there working with addiction and working with people and working through their challenges and looking at the intersection of drug and crime and wondering whether or not we could have brought a more trauma-informed perspective to the ways in which we were thinking of sentencing. So my focus was therapeutic jurisprudence, which is that if we are using the law, we have got to use the law in a way that is therapeutic. So my focus was on rehabilitation, reintegration, resocialization, and really working with individuals who would experience trauma to help them sort of reimagine their life scripts, their narratives. Every life is a narrative.
Every life.
And that is the work that got me in criminology. So I think the essence that I bring to even AI and data is that interdisciplinary perspective where I'm able to look at lives in a very multidimensional way, because no life is a monolith. We are a combination of so many experiences. And I think that is the intimacy that I have with data.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So you talk a great deal about data activism and ethical tech. Big words. In real life, in real time, what does that actually mean? And help us unpack that a little bit.
Well, data activism and data justice, very, very important at this moment. Data activism is really about understanding the intersectionalities of data, understanding the power that data holds, bringing equity into that data infrastructure, and really reimagining the ways in which we think about data and we use data. So one of the things that I'm very passionate about is communities understanding their data and understanding how powerful that is and understanding that data is what's being used now to define you. Data is now your DNA. And you have to understand that you still have a critical role to play in how you are defined and the narrative being told about you through your data. So when most of us relinquished our data, we had no concept that our data was worth anything, that our data could be monetized, that our data could even be weaponized against us. So one of the things we do through that space of data activism is really getting individuals to understand that power, understand the politics of data, but yet understand its promise to sort of reshape and reimagine and reposition individuals, families, communities. So you've got to pay attention. And data justice says that in this age of data, in this data-driven world in which we exist, in now this algorithmic-driven world in which we exist, data is the lifeblood of everything that we are doing now. What data also has the ability to do, because it has the ability to define, it means it has the ability to create access, to deny access, to create opportunities, to deny opportunities, to redefine legacies, to undermine legacies. Those are things that we cannot take lightly. So data justice says that data and algorithms and AI are now civil rights issues, because anything that can take agency away from you or autonomy away from you or undermine your democracy or undermine self-determination, these are critical things. So, about 350 years ago in the 17th century, when we came up with the social contract, which said that we were going to engage with each other collectively and we were going to give up certain rights because we were going to get protection and we were going to get democracy and we were going to get social order. But they developed that at a time that no one was thinking about algorithms. But because of algorithms, we're now reimagining the social contract. We're realizing we need a Bill of Rights to deal with these algorithms. So these are critical issues. They're about civil rights and civil liberties and human rights. So when we think about justice, we know justice is about fairness. Justice is about equity. And justice is about due process. And an algorithm has the ability to undermine due process because it's making a decision about you without you participating in that decision.
Help us understand why that is so important, especially one, if I'm a parent, right? Two, if I'm a young person who now I am on all the latest social medias. Now I have drafted my name. I've created a name. I use these social spaces to tell my story. Why is it so important to really truly understand my data and what I give out there to the world?
Well, as young people, we oftentimes create many identities before we find ourselves. And one of the things about data is not very forgiving. Data does not often allow us to change our minds. Data also has a very long memory. So the data points that we have given so freely may not be the data that we want to define us in our adulthood. So as young people, we often don't have the powers of discernment. Sometimes even as adults, we don't have the powers of discernment. So when we are young, we do things without thinking. And sometimes when we do things without thinking, we share a certain type of content that may not be the content that we want to identify us when it's time for a job, when it's time for a particular opportunity, when it's time for a particular kind of experience we're hoping to engage in. And that data says one thing about us, but because we don't see data, we can't touch it, right? It's very difficult for us to go back into that data pool and change who we are. So as young people, we've got to think, young people have got to think very critically about what am I sharing? What is the image that I'm creating? Would that image be forgiving? Would I have an opportunity to go back and course correct or erase those things and say, this is not who I am? Or am I sharing my data too freely? Am I sharing too many things? Am I sharing in a way that this data could be accessed to other things in my life that I may want to protect? Or the things that I want to share now, I may not want people to know in 10 years. So it's really about bringing a requisite level of due diligence and understanding concepts such as data privacy, your security. I always try to explain to young people, your data is an extension of who you are. Your data is an extension of Cole. Your data is an extension of your personhood. I always say, if I were to ask you, could I have your eyes? Would you give them to me? No, you won't. Right? But your wink is part of your data. The time spent by your eyes looking at something on your computer is being captured by companies, by advertising agencies, by any kind of big tech company. How long do you take looking at something? How long does it take before you make a decision? How many times that your eye may wink? A lot of people don't know our phones carry motion sensors, and that motion sensors are able to detect how we walk, our gait. Do we have a limp? Do we walk on one side? So if you have a phone for 5 years and we've been collecting your data, we can even see when you put weight on. Because when you put weight on, you walk slower. Your body may tilt to a particular side. If you've acquired a disability, if you've been injured, all of those things are collecting data, and it's all part of us. It's part of that personhood. So I speak about data in a way, it's an extension of yourself. So would you give it freely? We've been giving it freely. There's some we can't get back. But moving forward, we need to really be a bit more circumspect with the ways in which we're thinking about our data.
You know, I've had the pleasure of being in spaces where you have presented and you have spoken. And each time I'm in a space with you, I walk away much more knowledgeable, but also much more, and I don't even know if this is the correct word to use, much more cautious about what I'm sharing, how I'm sharing, questioning how much time do I take reading the small print? Does that matter? What do I, when it asks me to consent, to check boxes, I'm now asking myself, because there was a time when I would just, okay, I'm signing up for this new app. I'm signing up for this new experience. Yeah, why not? And now I'm in spaces where it's asking me, to track me? I'm like, why do they want to track where I'm at? And why does everybody need to know my location? We're even talking to young people in the space of dating and this concept of like, how do you negotiate who gets access to where you're located? And even saying to date me means when we're dating that I need to know where you're located. And if you don't give me that access, then what that tells me is that I cannot trust you. So we're starting to even see how tech is also in these personal interactions of relationships with young people that will determine whether or not we can be in a relationship. And if I give you my location and you turn your location off, that means you're possibly doing all of these things that I've imagined that isn't necessarily even true. So is that the kind of danger we're speaking to?
Well, that is definitely a very risky type of engagement, because it really doesn't speak to privacy. I think real trust is believing that when my location is off, that I'm conducting myself in a particular way.
Yeah.
That's how we knew it. You know, in the days when I was in grad school and we were now using cell phones, the research was showing how cell phones were now being indicted in more interpersonal violence, because now you had a cell phone, and let's say you were at the movies and someone called you, whoever you were with could have leaned over to see who was on your phone. So the cell phone was now critical to many cases where we were seeing interpersonal violence, because pre the cell phone, we had home phones. Yeah. And if you weren't home, someone could not contact you until you got home, right? Unless when we got pagers, and then we were able to see the number, and then we still needed to have access to a payphone and a coin to go and actually use it. So there's so many different ways in which technology is now playing a critical role in our lives. Some of us are very lucky that social media did not exist when we were teenagers. So we got away from that. Yeah. But I think it's about teaching and engaging with teenagers to use this technology wisely. I love technology. Yeah. I love technology, and I particularly love artificial intelligence, because I always speak about the democratization of intelligence and how important it is for us to do that. One of the things that I encourage young people to do is to use their social media, in particular Instagram, as a vision board. Create the person that you want to be in 5 years, the positive things, the things that you want to share, the things that you want to see yourself doing, and start to create those images. And when you look at that, I always say a cell phone is something that is very powerful, and a cell phone emits something called light. And the light of a cell phone is very, very strong and powerful. And when you put your face in that light, you want something positive coming back at you. And I always say that to young people. You don't want to have an extraordinary amount of negative content. You don't want to have things that, when you look at it, it's sending a particular kind of message, which may not be the energy that you need for success. I think it's a great place. It's a great interactive scrapbook. Yeah. It's a great interactive vision board. And you can build the kind of life that you want, the kind of future that you want, using it in that way. So if an employer or if a mentor or if someone looks on the page, they see you're projecting something. Yeah. And that's important. So there's great ways in which we could use social media as well. Yeah. But I think we always need to know the options. Yeah. Wow.
For folks like us, nonprofits, community groups, or even just mentors, how should we be thinking about data, and AI when it comes to reforming youth justice?
Most definitely. So many of the approaches at the moment really look at questions around bias and discrimination. Of course, we're using historic criminal justice data. We're building our risk assessment tools and our various assessment tools on these historic data points. And the history of those data could carry some very troubling, traumatic experiences for particular communities. Yeah. So much of the conversation has been around the discrimination, systemic bias, of course, racial justice questions, social justice questions, very, very important. What we are not seeing would be more innovative approaches to the use of data within the juvenile justice system. One, how do we ensure that our young people are engaging with technology? One of my challenges working in the justice system was that when individual is incarcerated, the year that they go into prison is also the year that they come out of prison. So it means that between that time, if it's 1 year, if it's 5, if it's 20 years, there is no personal growth or professional growth as well. You cannot go into that kind of penalized space. And then when you come out the same year that you went in. You need to come out the year and the day and the time and the hour and the minute and the second that's existing right now. I remember from my own experiences and with individuals who, friends of mine, a particular individual, and I may have shared this with you in the past. And a movie was made about him, right? Crown Heights, Colin Warner. Yeah. And I remember when he was exonerated and he came out of prison after doing more than 20 years for a crime he did not commit. One of the things that he always spoke about was that, one, you come out into a space that you don't know, and now you have to deal with certain technologies and different things. So my thing is, we could use technology in so many imaginative ways. One of the things that I've been thinking about is immersive justice. How do we combine like cognitive behavior therapy, virtual reality, augmented reality, and rehabilitation therapy and counseling, and come up with some sort of justice that is more real time, more behavior changing, more cognitive? How do we let people engage with those experiences and make better decisions? One of the things we both know when it comes to crime and criminality and that propensity for criminality or for commissioning a crime, it's bad decision making. Yeah. For a lot of people, it's just poor decision making. You just lack those skills because you did not develop those executive functioning aspects that require us to understand what risk looks like. But sometimes, given your situation, a risk might look actually better than what's going on for you. And we understand that reality as well. So how do we help people make better decisions, juveniles in particular? How do we put you in an environment where we mix gaming theory and criminal justice theory? How do we do that? So it's a real-time experience. You may be a better decision maker, and you're doing things daily that your guidance counselor, that your teacher could look at and say, okay, you are making better decisions, and you're putting them in situations that they're going to face. I have worked with individuals when it's time for a job interview, and they go out there, depending on the reaction they may get from the person at the front desk. It really destroys your self-confidence. Sometimes you're going with a particular kind of energy and someone gives you a particular kind of look. I've experienced that working with individuals in rehab for substance abuse and doing vocational training and spending a lot of time prepping them for the interview, and then they go to the place and then they come back. Sometimes they don't come back because just what happened there just leads them back to doing drugs, and they stay out of the facility, and now they have another case that they have to deal with. So how do we build that self-confidence? How do we create those experiences? How do we ensure people's time, if they, I would much prefer to have no prisons. Yes. Okay. Yes. I would much prefer, to make prisons obsolete. If we could do that, that would be the most radical form of criminal justice reform. Absolutely. But until we get to that place, we could use technology to remove bars and to break walls down and to create bridges and to ensure that the experience does not have to be traumatic, and to ensure that it does not have to be so penalized, and we can just lift people up and help them make the better decisions that they need to make. We could do those things with technology if we really wanted to do something exciting. But what we continue to see is we have this brilliant technology called AI, but when it comes to spaces like criminal justice, we are constantly replicating many of the old stereotypic approaches to justice, but saying we're doing it through data.
Something you just said, this idea of decision making. One of the things that I've heard many times with working with young people that have had experience in being in a facility, that they don't make any decisions. So they could be there from 1 month to 6 months to even a year, and have a whole year with no opportunity to make decisions, but constantly being corrected in the decisions, the small amount of decisions that they have, which is connected to themselves. And so so when I hear you talk about this idea of using AI and reimagining what we can do in that space, Why are we not doing these things?
Because again, I think our approach to criminal justice has always been that of the intelligence of punishment, as opposed to an adaptive intelligence that allows people to interact, to engage, and to sort of reinterpret what life is going to be. Life is one decision after another decision.
Yes.
That's what it is. Literally, all day we're making decisions. All day we're making decisions about our lives. Unfortunately, algorithms are making some of those decisions and doing a good job and doing a very not so good job and doing these things that we never believed it would do. But that's another issue. But for young people, how do you get them to make better decisions?
Yeah.
But decision making, as we've come to realize, if we think about the stock exchange, is about gaming as well, right? If we think about how CEOs make decisions, it's about they bring that gaming theory and they're bringing that gaming theory for years. I remember reading a very interesting study many, many moons ago, and it was a study that looked at juveniles who were justice involved. And back then we called them juvenile delinquents. We don't do that anymore, right? And CEOs. And they gave them the same psychological assessment test. And they realized on certain measurements, they scored the same thing, particularly when it came to taking risks.
I was just,
So how does one group take the risk and we celebrate them as astute business minds, bringing an extraordinary amount of business acumen to what they do. And then we have these young people who are taking these risks as well. And we call them delinquents. We know to be a CEO, you've got to be a bit of a delinquent. Right? Because we know some of them take big risks. And we know some of them take other risks that put their entire organization in very troubling situations. So how do we reimagine that kind of risk? They're all working with the kinds of resources they have. The CEO would have more resources. The CEO would have investments. The CEO would have a team, but still taking risk. So we've got to really reimagine risk. You know, they say that risk is also flip the script. It's this opportunity.
Yes.
But to show young people that, you know, there are opportunities that you are creating for yourself, but you're going to create some negative ones if you take these kinds of risks, but you are going to create some positive ones if you take this type of risk. So I think what we've never really brought to criminal justice and juvenile justice reform is imagination.
Ooh. I don't know why that sits with me. And it's mainly because I'm in these spaces. And you're absolutely right there. Renee, last week, Thursday, I had a young man in my class who is incarcerated at our jail say to me, Cole, when I go back to that cell, I don't know how to imagine. It's hard for me not to play back all of the things that I should have done, didn't do, the mistakes I've made. I don't know how to reimagine anything else. And the cement on those walls don't also give me opportunity to be with myself, to imagine something different. And I was like, how do we change that? Like, how do we bring a young person who's incarcerated for a number of months, who doesn't have a space to imagine, go into the world and try to reimagine something when he can't even do it within himself? And so I think imagination is key to this, but people are afraid of that. That imagination has to be checked. It needs checks and balances. Can you have imagination without that? Because I feel like the systems that I've seen, there always needs to be a check and balance. And I wonder if imagination prevents that from happening.
Well, what happens is that we oftentimes believe that there is a particular structure.
Yes.
There is a particular structure and system that needs to be in place for us to ensure that these individuals do things differently. But the world has changed. And every day, technology, and particularly AI, is showing us that things have changed, right? the education system was not prepared for ChatGPT.
No, not at all.
It was not prepared. It was not prepared for ChatGPT, and it happened. It didn't come out of academia. It came out of a young man with an idea about intelligence and an idea about knowledge and an idea about collective intelligence that academia was not thinking about. And now this is changing the dynamics of education.
Yeah.
We have got to think about our justice system. We have got to think about young people. We have got to think about their futures. If you cannot imagine another way of being, how do you change? Change begins with imagination, because you've got to imagine a different way. Yeah. When you reinvent yourself, or when you're thinking of a change in career, you've got to imagine and see yourself doing something in a particular place, in a particular space, in a particular state of mind. That's why it's important, particularly in juvenile situations, to engage young people in more conversation and more technology around imagination, because you will get better results. Because once I've imagined it, right?
Yeah.
I've done it. And I stole that from Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that he said in his book. When they asked him, those moves that you made, I mean, how did you come up with them? Did you do them before? Because remember, every time he did something,
it was something new.
Something new.
It was something new.
And he said that before he went to bed, he would just imagine himself twisting. And one time he used to spin like a ballerina, right? And he said he just imagined it. And imagination, I do believe that as well, means 99% of the work is done because you've created the image in your mind. The other 1% is just do it.
Yes.
And that is something that have resonated with me for years, because I am someone who I've reinvented myself about 7 times, right? Yeah. And I have a few more to go, right? And I sit down and I imagine, where do I go next? You know, I take this body of knowledge that I have, and how do I use it in a way that's more creative? What do I imagine myself? There is no end game for me. It's like, what do I imagine myself doing next? And one of the things I like to share with young people is imagine. When we were kids, we imagined.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
All the time.
So, Renee, there are programs that claim they can predict who's likely to reoffend, right? Or get locked up again. What's the danger in that?
The danger in that is you're taking human agency out of the equation, and you're taking imagination and that ability to change out of the equation. And what those predictive analytics tools do is, of course, they don't really think about the fact that you may be going back into the same environment with the same resources or even less, and up against the same kind of decisions. I really look at that as pseudoscience. I pay no mind to any kind of technology that wants to predict and who's going to be the next criminal. And if you are walking in a particular way, it means you're going to commission a crime. And that's a lot of pseudoscience. And those things generate a requisite level of popularity in certain quarters.
Okay.
That's a cop-out. If we are, that's what I keep saying. We have this technology. AI is a brilliant technology. Yes, it's a risky technology. Yeah. Yes, if you don't understand what you're doing and how those algorithms can go rogue on you and how those algorithms could misbehave, yes. Okay. But don't use something that's so innovative to create something that is so dull. You're undermining the imagination of the technology itself. Use it to create something differently. Use it to create, what are the care gaps that are there that will make someone reoffend? And how could we create the requisite level of wraparound services and bundle, psychological bundles, psychosocial bundle packages that people would need to transition? Let's do it differently. And that's one of the things that I spoke about, recently when it comes to sort of reimagining public safety and AI. What if we were to code not communities at risk, which is something that we continue to code.
Use all the time.
Let's not code, because so much of coding when it comes to criminal justice interventions are based on fear, right? So we code, risk. We code reoffending. We code all the things that are going to create an extraordinary amount of fear. I always say, instead of we code, or we may collect data, and we collect homicide data.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting way. Yes, we've been using it. How about we collect the data, how many interactions were diffused and de-escalated that did not lead to homicide? Then we may get something different. We may get community intelligence, we may get civic intelligence, we may get collective intelligence, we may get ancestral intelligence, we may get so many variations of resilience and compassion, if we were to code it that way as opposed to code it this way. If we were to code models that understood the experience, that understood the Black experience, to pull from the Black archives. I spoke about if we were to code improvisation when it comes to jazz, or if we were to code resilience, if we were to code imagination, which has always been part of the Black resilience, we would see different things. It's a way of seeing. And one of the things I encourage would be more young people with diverse backgrounds, more young people with imagination to get into data science, to get into AI, to bring that diverse perspective that's so required. If we code fear and we code failure, we're not going to get success. And we continue to do that. We code the failures of a community and want to build on that. So instead of coding failure, why don't we code trauma that's been untreated?
Yeah.
We're going to get a different result. Why do we code what's under-resourced, what's disinvested or underinvested? If we were to code that, we would get a different kind of metrics that says, this is how we reimagine communities. This is what communities need. This is a preventative strategy. This is a proactive approach. So instead of always looking at the propensity and the proclivity to do something criminal, let's look at the protective and the proactive.
Yeah, that's a paradigm shift. That's a deconstructing of a system that is...
Yeah, but if we do it, a lot of people are going to lose a lot of money.
Absolutely.
And that's
the problem.
That's the problem, right?
That's the problem.
Do we really want people to change their lives, or we want to make money off of people's failures to really do what they need to do? We've got to think about ourselves. So it's calling for sort of like a shift in conscience, shift when it comes to compassion, and really rethinking community intelligence, because we really need to think about that.
I feel like you've left us with so much. This question, it says, if you could leave us with one piece of advice, one question to always keep in mind when you hear the words AI, data, or technology, what would it be?
It would be for me, what is the last decision that an algorithm made about me? That's it. What is the last decision that an algorithm made about me?
That's got me wanting to go and check my phone. Let me think about what I've Googled, what I've...
Right?
Wow.
And that's it, because an algorithm is making hundreds of decisions about us, and you've got to ask yourself, or what was I denied? What was I denied by an algorithm in the last 5 minutes? Or if you want a list of things in the last 24 hours that I've been denied by an algorithm. And then you start to see what's happening with your data and what your digital twin actually looks like.
Digital twin.
And what sorts of opportunities and, resources and access that you are being denied. Because what it's saying is something about your legacy, and you're being shortchanged. Someone's profiting, but you're being shortchanged.
Wow. How can people reach you, Renee?
Well, one of the best ways, if you're looking for mentorship and if you're looking for any professional experience, is always on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. If you're old school, you can check me on Facebook. But and the even best way is through the University of Virginia School of Data Science. You can check our website. I am listed. I have an email. And for any question that anyone ever wants to discuss, I always try to make myself available because I think life is about service. It's about giving service to each other. And if I could be of service, I definitely will take the challenge.
Yeah. Renee Cummings, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot.
Thank you for listening. Check out our programs on the Delta Project's website, thedeltaproject.co, and be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.